There's another Big Brain Media podcast. I'm joined by Bliestek, who's a little bit croaky today, a little bit under the weather.
Just a little bit sick, yeah. It's not COVID. It's all good. Yeah. I've been tested.
You're like, I got that going for me. All right. It's just a terrible cold.
Yes, an annoying one.
Today we'll be just talking about some of the experiences we've had with younger generations who are typically touted as being more tech savvy. And their lack of tech savviness, because Bliestek does work in IT as a part of the education system, so he gets to see some of the derpy moments that the younger
just
people
a couple
have.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's it probably surprised a lot of people what sort of things you see go on, and how I guess that kids, well, not kids, but the younger generation these days, younger than us, even though we're not that old, just tend to not know the fundamentals anymore of how to, turn on a computer or turn off a computer.
Yep.
It's just things like that. It's pretty crazy, really.
Which I liked because we were speaking about this the other day, and you mentioned something that I found very sort of telling. When you said that your children will be the best ones in the class for using technology, not because they're going to be the smartest or you're going to drill it into them, but because you'll teach them the basics. Yeah,
100%. And I think that I think a lot of what goes on is that they're trying to, well, the government probably more so than anything, like SACE and all that, are trying to really drill in, as much information as they can into all these classes and stuff like that. And they're almost like removing the time required to be able to, for kids to be able to learn this sort of stuff. I mean, not to say that they couldn't make time to teach them this, but because the curriculums and stuff are so complex nowadays, they've almost just scrapped the whole idea of the basic IT courses at schools and colleges and everywhere, which I think is a big error on their part, because we're making I'll just call it a cloud-based generation, where they just get given a nice little GUI dashboard, and they can sit there and check some numbers and tick some boxes, and they think that means they can. Or even just, they can be IT savvy by doing that. Whereas, that's not really IT is really about the fundamentals behind how the stuff like that works.
Yep.
Not just I've just gone to a website. HTML5 now you can make web apps, and it's getting quite popular. As far as people are concerned, they're apps, and they just treat them as an app, but they don't realize that it's just, a lot of time behind the scenes is basic IT. And I think you said you've had a couple of scenarios where you've had some moments that you've had a bit of a facepalm moments and stuff like that.
Oh, yes, definitely. One of the things that sort of shocked me a little bit was, so I work with a younger person now who, being younger, I sort of took as they've been through school, they grew up having iPads at school and, computers everywhere. Whereas myself, when we were growing up, that was still sort of, it started off, they had a computer room with 10 computers, and that turned into 20 computers. And then we were so lucky because we had one computer to share between us all in every classroom. It was crazy. And, then you get these kids who have computers everywhere they look. So this person comes into the workplace and then absolutely shocked me by not knowing how to turn on their computer.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's basically what everyone's been taught nowadays is just what you need to do the work.
Yeah.
Not what you need to do to get to the point where you can do the work. It's just It's kind of like building a house without any foundation. You're just throwing concrete. You're literally just building a frame on top of dirt. You know what the big bad wolf says about that?
Yeah, that's a great analogy though. Building a house without the foundation. It's fantastic because this particular person was doing something that I found really funny. They were trying to turn on the screen because I didn't realize that the box next to it was actually a computer. And some
Yeah.
people out there might go, oh, well, maybe they've never used a computer with a tower type thing. You know, the last time I heard that was a 90-year-old woman 15 years ago doing that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying it's never happened before, but what I am saying is that 15 years ago, the elderly were in the same situation that some of these kids are in now.
Yeah. But it's not so different, really, is it?
Yeah, it's just a complete lack of understanding of how some of this stuff works. Whereas, you know, when we grew up, you knew what the computer part was. That was the bit that made all the noise and got hot and shit. And then you had the screen, you know, and if the screen had the computer part in it, well, it just made sense. That's the bit you turn on and off and, you know, that's the stuff. But these kids sort of grow up and they're like, I don't understand what this is. So if they replace my computer, do I get a new tower thing or is it just the screen they replace? That's an actual question I had.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to, like, I think you were telling me this, and like this is the exact same as what happened with me as well. But you know, when you were back at school, you were, you know, back when was it Windows 98 and before, used to, when you shut down your computer, it would say you're now safe to turn off your machine.
Yep.
And, you know, the teacher would wait for everyone to be at that same point and then tell everyone to press the button and turn it off.
Yep.
Right. And now it's kind of like close the lid.
Yeah.
So, like, I get people come all the time and they're like, oh, you know, I had trouble with my computer, blah, blah. Tried restarting it. You know, I tried turn it off and on again, all this sort of stuff. And then, you know, like I go into Task Manager or whatever and see the uptime and it's like 3 months. I'm like,
wow.
You said you shut down this computer and stuff. I'm like, yeah, and they're like, oh. I'm like, how do you do it? And they're like, oh, we close the lid and then we open it up again. I'm like, okay, like that's not shutting down your computer. Like, oh, what do you mean? Like, that's what I've always done. I'm like, well, poor computer. I was like, and basically I had to teach them, like, no, you go shut down. Or, you know, even for restarting, you know, restart. Like, I've had kids come in and they're like, you know, I just said, I'll just reboot your computer. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. And then just an awkward pause. And then they sort of look at me like, what do I do? How do I do that? And I'm just like, oh, come on, guys. Yeah. And I'm talking about high schoolers. I think part of the problem is Apple and Google and all those other companies where they've created this instant on, instant off, like, you know, vibe with your phones and all that sort of stuff, where that's what kids believe is the norm now. And a computer doesn't quite operate on the same wavelength.
Yep.
I mean, obviously you get some computers now, like the M1 MacBooks and stuff, that do. They operate essentially that way now. They're designed to be that instant on, instant off. But most computers don't, and they take, you know, 15 seconds to boot up if you do a cold boot and sort of stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I understand why they may assume that it's the same as like a phone. But even then, I mean, you talk to so many people, how many times do they reboot their phones?
Yeah, that's a damn good point.
Yeah. When's the last time you rebooted your phone, John?
Probably last week.
Okay.
I have a habit of, if I do an update on my phone, I wait a day and then I reboot it. And the purpose of that is that almost always, if there's an error on my phone, it's almost always just after I've updated it. So update, reboot, normally it's fine from there forward. It also means that every time there's an update, I can guarantee that I've given it a bit of a, you know, a little bit of a refresh, you know, shut it down, start again, just in case there's anything under the hood that's not quite right. It'll usually come back afresh.
Yeah. And I try and usually reboot my phone once a week as well. It's people don't seem to realize that phones are actually advanced computers.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're not, like, these things are more powerful than, you know, the computer uses to send the, what do you call it? Spaceship to Mars, not Mars, to the moon.
Yeah, to the moon. Something that, like, I find nowadays, which is funny, is the underappreciation of the technology that we can now carry around. Like, I'm talking phones, even smartwatches and, you know, very powerful tablets and laptops and stuff like that. Because I remember thinking distinctly to myself, I was sitting in the park in my town and I had my old flip phone, which was I think it was a third-hand hand-me-down. The camera, it was one of those flip phones with the camera you could spin to take a selfie, but someone spun it 360 and broken it.
Yeah, those old LGs or whatever they were.
And like this thing was not, like it was not bad for the time, I'll put it that way. But it still like completely, absolutely sucked compared to any iPhone that's ever been released, even the original one. This thing was very basic. And I was using the mobile Facebook site back then and thinking to myself, I wish they just put a web browser in this instead of some crappy little mobile web access thing it was a browser, but it was like a browser light. And then freaking to look at my phone now, I'm like, this thing's basically a supercomputer compared to that old phone. And people are like, it's just a phone. Like, this thing's more powerful than my first computer, like desktop.
Yeah. And it's probably more powerful than most people's home computers anyway. Like, a lot of people tend to hold on to old hardware. They won't, some people get on the bandwagon of refresh. But a lot of people don't. And a lot of people have computers for up to 10 years or more sometimes. So when you think about it, your phones that they've got is probably more than likely more powerful than their actual computer is.
Yep. That's one of the things that like I always remind myself is that my phone can edit 4K video, and I'm sure there's some tricks behind the hood that allow it to do that. But it can edit 4K video more seamlessly than my PC.
Yeah. It's crazy, isn't it?
So it's insane the amount of technology they've packed into this, little less than half a kilo brick. It's crazy.
Yeah. But with that, like I said, like that, companies like Apple and Google and that, they make the GUI so seamless and easy to use, which is great.
Yep.
But it takes away a lot of the fundamental need to learn how things actually work.
Well, a lot of what I've learned of computers over the years is fixing stuff that typically I've broken. So like networking, for example, I might go in there and have a look at what router settings there are or whatnot. There's people out there that I'm sure don't even understand that a router has settings.
Yeah.
Which like is just basic technology as far as I'm concerned. The ability to change a Wi-Fi password, for example. There'd be people who just have no idea how to do that. They just plug this little box in, and if it doesn't work, they call someone in and pay them megabucks to fix it.
Yeah, and they wouldn't understand also how that even works, like how they even get internet through that box.
Yeah.
Like it's just magic box.
So I'd love, like, if they had a class at school which was like the basics of technology. I mean, I can't see why they wouldn't, but you did bring up a good point the other day of fitting it into the curriculum.
Yeah, it's just, and the other problem is too, obviously different schools will teach different things, and while, say for instance, you could say year 7 is the year that you get taught these fundamentals, right? But if you are at a different school in year 7 that doesn't teach that, and then you start at this school in year 8, all the other kids are going to know the fundamentals, but you're not.
Yep.
But there's obviously there's no class for you to learn that in year 8 because it's a year 7 class. So this is where I think you get a lot of breakdown because no school or college is the same. They all have different ways of teaching and different things they teach. You're always going to have this real disconnect. And like one of the biggest problems, shutting down and restarting is, that you should know that. But the biggest problem overall, especially for students and stuff, is that a lot of the time they don't know how to save a document properly, like save their work. And that can cause huge problems when it comes to, like losing stuff and all that sort of thing. They don't know, most of the time now, they don't know where their file saves.
Yep.
They always just go either file save or, with Google Docs or Office Online or, even the proper Office apps, they now have got the auto save feature. So when you actually work on something, it just automatically saves in the background. And every single time you make a change, it will just update it. The problem is that people do that and just let it auto-save, and they have no idea where it's auto-saving to. And they rely on their like recent document list to open up the file again. And obviously, I think it maintains maybe 5 to 10 recent documents in that list. But once you go over 10, then the oldest one will get pushed off the list.
Yep.
And then when they go to open the document, like, I can't find it. It's gone. And I'm like, okay, where'd you save it? Like, in Word. I'm like, yeah, but where did you save the file to through Word? Oh, I just press save.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, like, come on, that's that. Do you like write on a piece of paper and then just leave the piece of paper on the desk and walk away? Like, do you like write your whole assignment, walk away, and like leave it there? Just walk away, and then when you want to come back to it, do you expect that it's still going to be there?
Yep.
You need to file it and put it somewhere, put it in your book or put it in your, whatever, your locker or somewhere that you know where it is to come back to it. But this is actually probably the problem I see everywhere at the moment. Not even just in schools, but it's just management of your resources and files on your computer.
That's actually a fantastic sort of segue to something that I noticed with the older generation, which I can understand with them. They wouldn't understand this concept, but for this young one that come in, I thought they would have understood it. The idea that you can log on to the computer in front of you, save a file, and it doesn't save onto that computer.
Yeah.
So in this case, it's not quite cloud computing, but it's similar sort of idea. This is a remote terminal into another computer on a server that's in a data center. But similar sort of idea that you can save it and it's not actually physically on your computer. And there's so many people who don't understand that. They're like, I hit save, I saved it to my documents. Okay, show me what you're doing. They go into the terminal computer and they save it onto my documents on a computer that's 1,500 kilometers away. I'm like, okay, well, you're not going to be able to find that on your computer. Like, good luck.
And I mean, that's that same principle is what happens with like OneDrive and Google Drive now. Half the time they're not even saving onto their computer. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I love cloud, right? We're over the last couple of years at work, we've been in a massive transitional stage between on-premise and cloud. And we are definitely very ingrained with cloud now, and we're still moving a lot more there, and in the process of moving our Microsoft Exchange servers and stuff up into the cloud and all that sort of thing. I love it, but there's still aspects that cloud's not always the most reliable.
Yep.
Cloud requires internet connections. There's definitely certain levels of security you got to take into consideration because you're literally handing your data to someone else. And as much as they can say, I promise you my data's going to be all good. It's kind of like the whole principle of, riding a motorbike and people being worried that not about you riding the motorbike, but about the other people that are driving around you, that they're going to hit you. That's the same principle because it's kind of like, Microsoft could say it's as secure as possible, but you get that one really smart hacker and they just find a way to get in and there you go.
And
so
always the big thing for me too, and you'd know this having known me for quite a while, is relying on remote hardware. I've never been a fan of it because we have now and then, like at work, for example, I've said about the remote server, the data center will go down and we can't do work. 1,500 k's away, there's a problem. Now we're stuck here just chatting because you can't do anything. All of our work's on the computer. You have
to have certain redundancies in place, really, for businesses to be able to actually still operate without that sort of scenario. Yeah. So it's a hard one. We still do stuff. Well, most of our servers are still on premise, and that won't change for a while. I mean, eventually it will probably, but we have redundancy on site, so we can have half the site go down. The other half site will automatically come up with like a disaster recovery site, and then that will actually feed through and bring up the other side again. So, if you're smart, you can do that sort of stuff. But when you're completely relying purely on cloud, you have to weigh up the level of risk. I guess it's a cost risk scenario in that one. You just got to work out, can you afford to go down? Versus do you want to spend the money on stuff to have on site that requires a lot more maintenance?
Yeah.
So there's just going to weigh up the risk factors there.
One of the things I always remember back in school was learning what a JPEG was. Like, and I don't mean like the technical specs of what, how a JPEG's encoded. I mean, like, the teacher was just like, use a JPEG. It's smaller and, takes up less space and it's, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. That's it. It didn't have to be like, oh, it encodes this way, it does this. It's just like, here's the difference between a JPEG and this one.
Like even like art students that are, trying to collate all these photos and stuff into, let's go for an InDesign document, for instance. They're getting like full res, like I'm talking, so let's go 4K photos. And they're all pulling them all into InDesign, and they're shrinking the photo down. But I mean, they're shrinking the house displayed in InDesign, but they're not actually reducing the file size.
Yep.
So you're getting these issues where a InDesign document that really could be, let's say, 50 to 100 meg.
Yep.
But they're turning out to be almost a gig because they've got full res images in there, which they are not being displayed at full res anyway, because they're being formatted for like a Word documents, like or portfolio scenario, stuff like that. Like that's the sort of stuff that needs to be taught, because you're going to get scenarios, especially in if you get into the enterprise world or anything like that, that sort of thing won't fly.
Yep.
Because they, big companies are about efficiency, and they have big data. They have a lot of data, and for you to be taking up that much data just because you're not formatting files properly, you get flagged straight away, right? Especially when you're sitting next to someone who's doing it right. I mean, I get it's not necessarily the most simple thing, but when that's what you're doing regularly, that's something that even if you have to learn to do it yourself, go out of your way to figure out how the best way to do it, something you should do. You should upskill yourself on. And it's not even just for pictures, really. It goes with anything. Learning about how files incorporate with each other, and you don't need to, like you said, figure out how they encode or anything like that. But just understand the fundamental that you get a base file and you start throwing other files on top, it's going to get big.
Yeah.
It's going to fill up quite quick, and how you can minimize that. And especially with restrictions around email and like file size you can send and all that sort of thing. I mean, really, I think the default nowadays is 10 meg you can send through an email. It's not a lot when you think about it. When you're watching a Netflix video, it's like 2 gig. So that's nothing. And then when you compare it to a file size of almost a gig for a document that should not be anywhere near that, it's just. Yeah. Anyway, you get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I get the point.
Yeah.
Well, we might end it at that anyway. It's been good talking to you about the cloud generation. Did you come up with that, or did you get it from somewhere?
Well, I just thought of it, so I guess I did. I don't know, I'm sure someone else has talked about it before, but
but that's still clever cooking. Well, thank you for joining me.
No worries.
Once again, and I'll put your Twitch and whatnot link in the description of the episode if anybody wants to drop into your Twitch streams. And
sounds good.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
No worries. Thanks, everyone.